It's that progress over perfection, or progress before perfection, I would say, is a key sort of ingredient to dialing down that perfectionism trait. It's building that body of evidence. It's trying things, seeing what works. I was given a presentation yesterday and we were talking about take action, record the results, adjust, go again. Very simple kind of circle. But it is that idea of whatever you do something. Every tiny step, no matter how seemingly insignificant or scrappy or unpolished, is a step forward, and it will contribute to the business that you are looking to build and celebrate and share with the world. So if in doubt, do something. Action before motivation, as they say.
Hello and welcome back to the Art of Value Whispering podcast. And if you're here for the first time, welcome. This is the show where we talk about value whispering, the smarter way to market your small business, which just happens to be brilliant for introverts. Each week, I share simple, practical steps that you can take to grow your business in a way that aligns with your values, your vision, and your energy, so you can make the impact that you care about without burning out or compromising on your integrity. And today's episode is a brilliant one to kick off the year because I'm joined by Mark Franklin, the author of How to Embrace the 4 Fears of Business Ownership. And if you've ever found yourself thinking things like, I'm not ready yet, or I'm just not good enough, or I don't have time, or what if I fail, or everyone else is doing such an amazing job at this, there's no space for me in this market, the usual things, then you are going to find this conversation really validating and empowering. What I love about Mark's approach is just how practical it is. We talk about the 4 fears in everyday language, no coaching language, and we look at how they show up in your real life, what they feel like, and how they can often hide as facts instead of fears. And we also talk about something that I know many of you will appreciate as introverts, the difference between thinking and doing, why progress matters more than perfection, and how to build confidence through tiny, consistent steps. Mark also shares a great reframe about failure and why fear is not something you need to get rid of, but something you need to learn to work with. But before we dive in, I want to just share a quick note with you because this episode is coming out to you on Wednesday, the 21st of January, and on Monday, the 26th of January, something very exciting is happening, or at least I think so. My new book, Value Whispering, the smarter way to market your small business that just happens to be brilliant for introverts, will be published on Amazon and at a very special launch price of just 99 cents, whatever your currency, it'll be at a teeny weeny price just for the launch on Monday. So do go and download that. And if you have been enjoying this podcast, you are going to love this book because it's my entire value whispering process, the entire blueprint I take my clients through, including exactly how to market your business, exactly how to talk about your business in a way that gets the attention of your dream clients, exactly how to manage great sales conversations and feel confident through that, how to onboard clients, how to manage your time, your energy, your mindset, everything. It's all in this book, and I've really stripped it back so it's just as simple, straightforward, and practical as it possibly can be. So I can't wait for you to get your hands on that. And if you do download it, I would be so appreciative if you could leave an honest review on Amazon for the book. And if you do that, to show my appreciation, I will enter you into a prize draw to win a mastermind day here with me in Switzerland, in my home, with a small group of entrepreneurs or business owners looking at your business and looking at exactly how value whispering could be helping you grow your business faster in 2026. That day is worth £2,500, the equivalent in euros, dollars, it's super valuable. You're going to get the support of myself, but even more valuable is that we get to deep dive into your business to help you really have more impact this year, achieve more of your goals, and feel really confident as you do that. So I will give you some more details on how you can enter that at the bottom, but I'll already share the page you can go to with more of the details. That is melittacampbell.com/competition, and you'll find all the details there. You can win a place. If you talk about the book on social media, again, share a snapshot via that competition page and you'll get an entry as well into the masterclass. Do both, a review and a social media post, and you'll get 2 entries. You can double your chances. So yes, I am very excited for Monday and I can't wait for you to get your hands on the book. Meantime, let's dive in to how you can tackle those 4 most common fears of business ownership with Mark. Hi, Mark. It's great to have you with us today and kick off this amazing new year.
Yes, thank you so much, Melitta. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I think your topic couldn't be more perfect because we've had the plan episodes, and one of them we were looking at, what is the fears that you have that might be holding you back from your plans? And you are the 4 fears guy. So I couldn't think of a better episode to start the new year with. And you've got the book, The 4 Fears of Business, and we're going to dive into what are those exactly. But what I would love to start with is if you could share a bit of your story with the audience. How did you become the 4 Fears guy?
Thank you. Well, so to begin at the beginning, my background is actually graphic design and communication. That's what I studied at university. Communication has always been this massive passion of mine. As a designer, I always felt that it was our job to sort of take the client's brief and communicate it in a way that excites and delights the audience and is as appropriate as possible to sort of engage. And I always used to describe it as sort of capturing their attention, capturing their imagination, capturing their heart. And from a corporate point of view, so I worked in children's publishing for 22 years. And I began in that industry as a designer, as a marketing designer, producing leaflets, brochures, building websites and things for the sales teams in order for them to be able to go out and capture imagination, attention, heart, and so on. Because communication is so important to me, I really felt it was important to sit down with these salespeople and say, right, okay, what is it you need? What are your pain points? Where are you struggling? What is it that your audience is looking to hear from you? And through those conversations, what kind of really surprised me, I think, was that it wasn't about the tools and the resources and the marketing and the beautiful designs. It was about the inner confidence that they did or didn't have in terms of picking up the phone, booking those meetings, generating those leads, converting the sales. If they themselves didn't have that inner belief that they were capable of going out and putting books into people's hands, they weren't selling. And so as I kind of grew within this sort of career within the publishing arena and moved up the ladder, as it were, I started sort of investigating and encouraging and then bringing into the business the kind of positive psychology angle, coaching, mentoring, leadership, personal development in order to help the sales team unlock that confidence. And from a personal point of view, I found that it was hugely beneficial for my own journey as well. Because as I say, being trained as a designer is very different to being trained in essentially becoming a managing director or CEO of a large publishing company. But to have that investment in my own confidence, beliefs, hesitations, fears, was huge in allowing me to embrace what it is I really wanted to achieve and why that was important, and therefore what I was actually going to be comfortable in doing about it.
Yeah, I love that. And our start in life is very similar. At university, I did design management, and I don't know about you, but it really helped me to see things differently to my colleagues when I ended up working, that they were all like, well, this is the job we're trying to do. And I was naturally seeing the bigger picture. Yeah, but what
Yes.
does that link into? And I think you never quite have this is the one way to do things attitude. You're always looking at fresh inspiration and how can we keep this new and relevant and engage people, and it has to capture their attention. But as you say, it's more than just the attention, it's their hearts as well. And you mentioned there about salespeople. I think we often think salespeople equals massive extroverts and super confident. I think this fear affects all of us. So, and yeah, nobody is going to hold anyone back as much as salespeople who have to be pushing out there and get so much rejection every day. So yeah, what an amazing space to learn those skills and find those fears. So from that work, were the 4 big fears always evident, or is this something that's evolved over time?
So the four fears are essentially the most common hesitations that just kept coming up in these conversations. And, I should say the sales force was huge. There was a big number of people. So I was having a lot of conversations again and again and again. And I kept hearing the same four worries cropping up. This idea of I'm not ready, I'm not good enough, I don't have time. What if I fail? So in sort of modern parlance, we would sort of describe that as perfectionism, imposter syndrome, procrastination, and obviously the overarching fear of failure. But in that kind of everyday language, in those coaching conversations, when you're exploring somebody's story and being a little bit more emotional, a little bit more vulnerable around what those feelings were, it was just coming out in terms of that. I know I can put these books in people's hands, but until I've read the entire catalogue, until I've read every single book, until I've been on the social media course so that I know I can post things, in places that are going to attract an audience, all those kind of I'm not ready until I do this. It has to be perfect. And then I'm ready to start the conversation. But I can't be perfect because there's someone over there who's doing this much better than me. And then you get to the comparisonitis, and then you get into, so I need a bit more time so that I can read the books and perfect my social media posts and so on and so forth. They all interweave, they overlap, but it was just that constant kind of, if I don't have the knowledge, if I don't spend a bit more time than I've actually got getting that knowledge, then I'm not going to be as good as that person next to me, and therefore I'm going to fail. And what will people think if I get it wrong? Those were the things that kept coming up. And as you've rightly said, Melitta, yes, salespeople, you think are these kind of gregarious, loud, extrovert, picking up the phone, full of confidence. But the fears essentially have sort of manifest or crossed over every single discipline or every industry or sector that I've ever kind of involved in. So I hope that by claiming to be the four fears guy, those fears resonate with everybody.
Yeah. And so we had a discussion about this before the podcast, and I've seen these four fears time and time and time again. And what strikes me about them is that we're not aware that they're fears. We think it's the truth, or we think that's just the way it is. And very often they've been with us so long, like you mentioned there, the fear of not having enough time. But often we think, oh, yeah, I don't have enough time. I've got the kids and the dog to walk and this to do. And we have so much pressure in this modern world. It can feel like reality and the truth. So before we dive into the fears, I was curious, how can we tune into these to find which is our fear? And as we dive in, probably people are going to realize that they most likely have all of them to some degree, because as you say, they're all interconnected. They don't kind of live alone. They like to live in a pack. So how can we start to find what is a fear and what is the truth?
It's a really good question. And again, you're absolutely right in so much as we've carried those versions of the story with us for quite some time, to the point that we're so used to living with them that they do feel true. In terms of which one do we individually lean into the most? Again, they overlap. It'll be things that you'll find yourself saying in conversation. So if you are in a corporate role and you're in a team meeting and someone comes up with something and that makes you feel a little bit kind of wobbly, what is your natural reaction to that? Is it the, I can't possibly contribute because I don't have the skills, I can't possibly contribute because I haven't got the time, my workload is too crazy right now? Underlying all of those kind of, and it's interesting you mentioned time actually, because that's the one that people tend to volunteer first, because it feels like the most sort of practical and least emotional. Again, it feels factual. There are only 24 hours in the day. I've got my family. I've got these other priorities. I've got my job. There literally isn't any more time that I can give to this project other than the 30 minutes I've carved out. So that feels like an easily justifiable, and I'm going to use the word excuse, an easily justifiable way of saying, this isn't something I can commit to. But what's really interesting about that I don't have enough time fear is it's more likely born out of some of those other things that sit underneath. I'm not prepared to commit time to this because I'm not feeling worthy in terms of my skills, my experience, that underlying worry of, I might get this wrong, I might let my team down, my business might suffer, I might disappoint my family or friends. So it comes from conversation. It comes from, again, just listening to yourself, listening to the things that you would default to saying in a situation where you're getting that sort of tightness in the chest and the kind of wobble in the tummy. When you get into the deeper conversation with someone, it becomes sort of obvious quite quickly. As you said, there's a lot of intertwining there. There's things that kind of overlap and trigger off of each other.
So once you find one fear and you start to unpick that, do the other ones loosen a little bit? Or
Yeah, I think that's fair. And again, through the sort of coaching conversations that I have, and digging into sort of that historic story, there could be something from quite an early sort of stage of your life where something happened and you've attached this meaning or belief to it. So say, for example, you were in primary school and you were invited to the front of the class by the teacher to read a poem that you've written, and you stumbled over a few words and a couple of the kids sniggered. And that can very quickly build over time into I'm not comfortable being at the front of the room, therefore I don't want to engage in public speaking. Therefore, if I'm in a meeting and someone asks me to give a presentation, this makes me feel really awkward and it's not something I want to do. So I will deliberately sabotage myself in terms of not finding the time to prepare for it properly. I will deflect or push back on any invitation to be center of attention or focus in that meeting in that moment because of something that happened a long, long time ago that you have interpreted. Again, the version of that story, which changes over time through our memories and so on, no longer serves us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think once you start to disprove some of these, then you think, oh, what else isn't true? Your understanding of what's real for you starts to shift a little bit, and you do start to become a bit more questioning, or at least that's been my experience.
Absolutely.
Overcoming some of these myself as well.
Sure.
There, yeah. So your 4 fears are, you hinted at them earlier, that not being ready, not being good enough, not having enough time, and this fear of failure. Which of those should we dig into first?
Ooh, we've touched on the time one being sort of the most obvious. I think the not being good enough is always a really interesting one. Again, that kind of imposter syndrome, comparisonitis. It's certainly the one I think that I personally have sort of lived with sort of most visibly throughout sort of my life. And what's interesting about that one, again, in terms of the retelling the story from the point of view of fact rather than emotion, and digging into all those moments in the past where you have been good enough, where you have taken action, where the thing that you thought might happen that you're worried about didn't happen. The fact that typically when you're in conversation, other people will shine a light on what you do well. But we ourselves are very quick to dismiss or deflect or not put any attention or time into our own successes. And there's a little tip there really in terms of how do you start dialing down the imposter syndrome. It is leaning into that body of evidence that already exists that proves just how capable you are.
Mm-hmm. So where does this fear come from? Do you think it's more, as you said earlier, that something's happened as a child, maybe we didn't get the scores and we felt ashamed about not doing as well as our peers or something like that? Is that the root, or can it come from anywhere?
It can be all sorts of things. You've got your culture, your sort of family history, your schema, etc., etc. It's going to be little moments, almost kind of insignificant moments, potentially, where something's happened and you have, for whatever reason, attached a meaning or a decision to that moment in time, which then grows into a belief and a behaviour. And we start leaning into that belief behaviour. It becomes our default. Again, our brains like patterns. They like to follow the things that they've seen before. They feel comfortable in sort of repeating experiences or, again, following those neural pathways that already exist because that's comfortable to them. And so if we start to lean into that belief of, I'm not worthy of the success that I'm pursuing, what if it all comes tumbling down? The kind of continual reinforcement of that thought only exacerbates the manifestation of, well, clearly I'm not good enough, clearly I'm going to fail. What I try to do, and again, many coaches do this as well, but stepping back into that past in order to change our future, we're just looking at those historic events where those beliefs popped into our heads for the first time And using, again, this body of evidence, using this journey that we've been on since that moment, using this new version of you as opposed to the version of you in that moment, to kind of reflect and look back and say, well, look, hold on, that isn't actually true. It doesn't serve you. What if? But again, based on everything that you have achieved, everything that is factual proof, logical proof, stripping out some of the emotion, just looking at the absolute facts of how far you've come. What if we can begin to retrain some of those neural pathways, adjust those beliefs, adjust that meaning, and make a different decision, bringing essentially a fresh perspective to that historic meaning.
Yeah, I love that. And just such a simple thing people can start to do right now, to start just questioning things and hold on a minute. Yeah.
Well, it sounds obvious and it sounds simple. It is difficult in so much as, again, you're challenging yourself to overcome a lifetime of belief, which leads somebody into a place of vulnerability at best. And no one likes to feel vulnerable, which is why it becomes easy for us to stick to those mantras of, I don't have time, I'm not ready, etc., etc., etc. To challenge those is actually very difficult. It's very hard. It takes a lot of bravery, a lot of courage. But once you start leaning into that new perspective, it's incredible what you can unlock.
Yeah. I remember my first business, I really became quite aware, probably 2 or 3 years before I did anything about it, that my business wasn't working for me. I was doing great work, I was getting paid well, but it wasn't really fulfilling me and didn't have the meaning that I was looking for. But then I didn't dare think about what else, because I was like, it feels like there wasn't anything else. This was the only thing I could possibly do. And so, yeah, as you were saying, you stay stuck because you don't dare to think differently. But then as soon as it really got so painful, I thought, okay, I can't continue. I have to find something else. That other thing became really clear and obvious, and I was made the change really fast, and it's been amazing ever since. So I think maybe if you overcome one fear and you feel the benefit, then that helps you to go through that process and have a dare a little bit more. Has that been your experience?
Very much so. Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's retraining your brain based on those new experiences and that new joy. And as you mentioned, I've had quite a similar journey. I myself found I was in a role that wasn't satisfying me, but it was so comfortable. It was very well paid. I was traveling the world. It had all those kind of trappings of what you would call success. And yet I wasn't enjoying that success. That success wasn't authentic to me. It wasn't really what I wanted. And it took a big brave step to say, right, I'm walking away from this. I need to follow my heart. I need to explore what really matters to me. And why is this? What is it I really want? Again, why is it so important that I'm prepared to take brave action to make it happen? But yeah, then you do get that snowball effect of, this is starting to bring me joy. I feel much more aligned to my values. That authenticity piece comes through. And I think that shows up in your work as well. I think that joy radiates, and therefore you start to sort of attract the people, the opportunities, and so on and so forth into your life that then reinforce that decision and continue to build up that body of evidence of what you're capable of and why this is where your joy truly is.
Yeah, it becomes that virtuous circle going in the right way instead of the doom circle going the
Absolutely.
opposite way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we often think that things like imposter syndrome and fear and not feeling good enough is more of a female problem. But I know Claire Yosa, who's been on the show recently, which she's been on a couple of times, her research showed that actually it's almost 50-50. It affects people the same. So in your experience, while it may affect men and women equally, do you see it showing up differently and therefore the way to resolve it is different, or is it the same?
I think the main difference, again, this is just speaking from my own experience, because I tend to work with women. At least 95% of my clients are female. And I think that's because, again, my experience, women are braver and more honest and more authentic in their journey towards trying to find that happiness that they deserve. I think men, it's going to sound a little bit old fashioned, but again, this is from my experience. Men are stuck in that historic, I'm the caregiver, I'm the breadwinner, sorry, I'm the man of the house. I need to look after my family. It's my responsibility. I cannot be seen to fail in that. So I will endure the struggles and essentially we're talking beyond sort of fixed mindset. We're talking, slipping into sort of anxiety, stress, overwhelm, burnout, depression. And we see that in the stats. Unfortunately, if you look at things like stats for deaths by suicide here in the UK, there are overwhelmingly more men choosing to sort of end their lives in that way because they are less equipped, less able to have those very emotional, vulnerable conversations simply through schema and culture and not wanting to admit failure.
Yeah. I think it's probably, well, my experience, I used to coach leaders in communication in a corporate environment. And yeah, I saw there it's much harder for the men to own up that they don't know it all and be vulnerable. And as a leader, you have to have some vulnerability. Otherwise, you're building a wall between you and your team. You have to have that
Absolutely.
kind of openness. And that was something that they found really difficult because I think it's been really ingrained in them that, this is your environment, you come in, you naturally know everything. And of course, that's just not reality at all, but it's very much the culture still, which is a shame. So, yeah, I see a lot more women in the personal development space. I think we are still in that phase of, okay, well, in a way, figuring out what do we do with this life? And we are starting to have more opportunities. So, we want to step into those confidently and do a good job. And men perhaps are in just a different phase and just aren't so yeah, it's not so easy for them to do that.
Yeah. And of course, we are generalizing. There are some incredible male coaches out there, and there's also some incredible male leaders who are very much in touch with those kind of emotions and hesitations and are very open about that, which is fantastic. It's
Of course.
But there are still those societal expectations and cliches, I guess, which we feel obliged to follow.
Yeah. So, okay, we've looked at time and not being good enough. What about this fear of not being ready? And I think particularly, I know most of the people listening to the show are business owners. And so this is something that I see coming up a lot, but it's also, we need to get out there and do stuff and be present. We can't wait. Otherwise nothing happens. So how do we start feeling more comfortable with doing things before we think we're ready?
I'm going to sort of reflect back on something you said earlier, Melitta, if I may. Again, thinking about our sort of design paths and that kind of sketchbook mentality of just trying things, sketching ideas out and playing with things and seeing what happens. I've been out on my own in business for 2.5 years now, and I will hold my hand up and say I am a recovering perfectionist. So, I have certainly spent too long waiting to try something new or make a brave decision or take action simply because I didn't think I was ready. I couldn't launch my business until the website was live and, all those kind of silly things when you should just be out there talking about what you do, because coming back to the communication thing, talking is everything. That excitement, that passion that you have for what it is you're trying to build is so much more valuable than a perfect website. It's that progress over perfection, or progress before perfection, I would say, is a key sort of ingredient to dialing down that perfectionism trait. It's building that body of evidence. It's trying things, seeing what works. I was given a presentation yesterday and we were talking about take action, record the results, adjust, go again. Very simple kind of circle. But it's that idea of whatever you do something, every tiny step, no matter how seemingly insignificant or scrappy or unpolished, is a step forward, and it will contribute to the business that you are looking to build and celebrate and share with the world. So if in doubt, do something. Action before motivation, as they say. The joy comes from the doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always tell myself it's a service for my clients and my community if they see me showing up not perfectly, because then they're going to think, oh, well, she can do it that badly and do okay. Then, I do. So my goal is always to be a little bit rubbish.
And we laugh, but you're absolutely right. There's huge value in that because, again, linking into the imposter syndrome, how much more relatable are we when we are human as opposed to these, high on a pedestal, absolutely immaculate in every way, and people feel like I can't possibly be like that. That's a disservice to our audience, as you say. So no, it's great to be a bit scrappy. Scrappy is good.
Yes, exactly. And where people are already is still valuable. So they may not be where they want to ultimately get to, but I don't think anyone takes that step to start their own business if they don't really believe they have something valuable to share with other people. If they don't have some kind of solution or a vision, and even just sharing that is already valuable, I believe. So
Absolutely. Yeah,
let's get out there.
totally. There was a friend of mine many years ago used to use this saying. So obviously you've got Simon Sinek's why. And she'd always sort of say, make your why bigger than your but. But being like, just B-U-T, the but being the hesitation. So as you rightly say, you've got this wonderful thing that you want to share into the world. Make the reason for doing that louder than those reasons for not taking action, for waiting too long, for waiting until it's perfect, for not spending the time on it, and so on and so on. So yeah, why bigger than your but?
I love that. And I talk about that in my book, A Shy Girl's Guide to Networking, that once you start to understand your vision and why is this important to me, and you start to get intentional about that, then your fears do seem to diminish naturally. It's one of the quickest and easiest ways to do it, because you start to see that, you have some value and it's important. Doing this thing is going to make a difference for me, my clients, my family, whatever the context. So yeah, exactly. But unless we go out there and try, we don't know what comes next. So you have to take that first step. So yeah.
Absolutely. And you learn so much from doing as well. Even again, if the results aren't quite what you were hoping, the benefits of taking that action and then informing the next step that you take on your journey, it's huge. It's wonderful.
Yeah. And coming back to Claire Yosa, in her episode, she was talking about with imposter syndrome, the difference that she's seen with introverts and extroverts is that introverts tend to think, they have that bias for thinking, so they tend to stay stuck longer than extroverts who have a bias for taking action. Is that your experience? And I was curious with these fears, if you see the way that introverts can move beyond these fears as being slightly different in any way?
That is a really good question. So I'm an introvert myself, although I would say sort of newly recognized. I've certainly lived a life of being the sort of the shy, quiet one, but I realize now that it's not a lack of confidence. It was all to do with how I manage my energy when I show up in a room.
Yeah.
I personally don't think the fears are different or affect introverts or extroverts differently. However, as you say, there is that expectation of extroverts to perhaps adopt, or they are better at adopting sort of pretender masks. So they will show up in the room and with their fantastic energy and that kind of bravado, which you may then sort of misconstrue as being confidence and lack of fear. But if anything, it could be sort of a form of compensation, not in a bad way. I certainly don't knock extroverts, and I don't mean to do that in any way, shape or form. I like what you say there about sort of thinking first. Introverts, again, bit of a stereotype or generalization, but introverts tend to think before they talk. Extroverts tend to talk in order to inform their thinking. And that, in terms of how the fears play out differently, I guess the risk for introverts is that we spend too much time thinking before we talk. So again, coming back to plenty of scenarios I've still been in or witnessed where there's someone in a team meeting who has something hugely valuable to contribute, but they're waiting for that moment, again, with those little voices in their head saying, I don't know if this idea is fully formed yet, so I don't know whether it's going to share it. If I say it out loud, what will people think? Blah, 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 blah. I think we all have those feelings, introverts and extroverts. Extroverts, I think, will say it in order to then learn from the reaction, whereas introverts perhaps are mulling over the reaction. And I guess it's fair to say that perhaps a little bit more hesitant because they are spending too much time pondering the reaction before they actually take the action. Maybe I've talked myself out of them being the same.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. And you mentioned there that you're an introvert. How has that shaped your journey? Do you think it's helped you become more aware? Because as you're saying, as introverts, we do like to see and observe and reflect and find those patterns before we come out with anything. Do you think that's helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, going back to my design background, the communications element, introversion, I think, has allowed me to be a better listener. to therefore understand the brief, understand the story, do a better job in communicating that sort of end result in a more appropriate way. As a coach, being a great listener is 101. It's absolutely essential. I do love hearing other people's stories. I would much rather be in a room listening to someone else talk about what they do and why they're special and celebrating their story than talking about myself. So that plays out very well in the kind of coaching space. I think, again, having only recently sort of recognized that historic hesitation, I suppose, as introversion, what it's made me very sort of comfortable and clear on is how I use my energy now. And I think before I could label myself as an introvert, I would do all the things that introverts typically are not associated with. So I love networking. I'm more than happy getting up and speaking on stage. And because I'm so passionate about what I do, I'm perfectly comfortable doing those things. But afterwards, I would be exhausted.
Yeah.
And I didn't know why. And it was because I was giving so much of that introvert energy to the moment. But I now know that I need to build in that recovery time in order for me to continue to be the best for sort of the audience in front of me. Otherwise, yeah, I come across as being the sulky one in the corner who doesn't want to speak to anybody, which isn't true, but that's how it might be interpreted.
Yeah. And I found with age as well, I need more recovery time. Like I was speaking recently at an event and it was wonderful that I had so many questions afterwards. I was literally the last person to leave in the evening, but then I had to take most of the next day off just to like recuperate and probably just take it easy the next 2 days as well. Was before an evening off I could have bounced back. But I think staying in tune with that energy and how it shifts for you in different seasons of life or different situations is so powerful, and that's going to fuel everything else that we can do. But otherwise, as you say, I think there's nothing introverts can't do that extroverts can. And very often we mistake introverts for extroverts because they're not being that typical introvert, shy and hiding in the corner, which actually very few introverts are that bad, I think. So it's interesting. So let's come to the biggie, the fear of failure.
Okay.
What can you tell us?
This is what I always describe as being like the overarching fear of the four, because the other three kind of play into it. It's that if I don't have all of the knowledge, all of the skills, all of the expertise, if it isn't absolutely perfect, then when I put it out there, it's possibly not going to be good enough. It's not going to resonate with the audience in the way that I would like. Perhaps I need more time to get it right, to get it perfect, to know exactly what my audience are looking for. Then it will be good enough. But if I don't do these things, I will have failed. And what will that look like? And how will other people view me? And so on and so on. And, that kind of snowball effect of worrying about what other people think of us. I always talk about the relationship that we each have with failure as being a choice, because failure is entirely subjective. What failure means to me will mean something completely different to you, and so on and so forth. And again, in reality, when you apply nothing but logic or fact to a situation where we might view a moment in time as being a failure, what was the actual negative outcome from that moment? This relationship that we have with failure, I kind of talk about it being on sort of a spectrum, a line between those two versions of events, the factual and the emotional version. So the factual is, this is what happened, and the emotional being, and this is how it made me feel. And typically, the more in tune we are with the facts, the more likely it is that we will reflect on that moment of failure, and I'm using air quotes and around the word failure, as a teachable moment, a learning experience, something that we can move on from with optimism and perhaps resilience. Whereas the more emotional we feel about that particular moment or event, the more likely it is that those voices, those thoughts of I wasn't good enough, I wasn't ready, I should have spent more time, start building up. And then we get into that sort of cyclical amplification of the noise that holds us back from trying something new again. And we retreat back into our existing sort of safety net or comfort zone, and we're less inclined to take another brave step. So in terms of the work I do around the fear of failure, it's leaning into that body of evidence in terms of what is the factual version? What do we actually take from that perceived failure? And also, again, reflecting back on those particular events or moments in our past and the meaning that we've associated, that kind of view of failure that we've attached to that specific event, and reimagining that, applying this new perspective. Because, 52-year-old Mark here now has a very different opinion of, when 7-year-old Mark was in the classroom and something happened and he felt that wasn't good enough. It simply isn't true. And there's no value to me holding on to that 7-year-old story now. It is time to let it go. That's just a sort of example of how that might work, that sort of mechanism. But yeah, it's that relationship, I think, is the really important point. The relationship that we have with our opinion of what failure means to us.
Yeah, I like that. I've never thought about it that way before, but it's really helpful to see that scale and think, okay, I'm dwelling on this too much. How can I move over to the facts a bit more and maybe even reassess, well, what is failure? And it's not, success isn't necessarily the opposite of that, but that might be what's skewing things for us. So yeah, I love that. Thank you. So you've talked a lot about reflecting on our fears. Where have these come from? Is this true? What could we do instead? Exploring that personally. But is there anything else we can do to help us experience less fear in our business? One thing that cropped up for me when you were talking is that I've been really fortunate, and I have talked about this on my podcast before, to have just incredible bosses and mentors throughout my career who have encouraged me to fail. My very first boss, I would go to him with ideas, let's do this. And he's like, okay, I've tried that before and it didn't work, but hey, maybe you've got a different angle on it. Perhaps it's a different time. Try it and let's see. And whatever he encouraged me to try, we'd always sit down afterwards. Why did this fail, or why did it work? And what are we learning from this? And then my most recent boss, before I started my own business 17 years ago, he was always like very curious of like, well, why would people take a job they know they could do? There's no growth in that. You need to fail in order to grow. And if people aren't willing to fail and grow, they're going to be bored. They're not going to contribute to this business. He had such an interesting view on failure and really actively encouraged people to think differently about what they do and don't take on. And he kind of reworked how people were assessed as well. So they weren't so fearful that, oh, if I mess up, that's my bonus gone. So I wondered if things like your environment and the people you have around you, mentors, that kind of thing, if that can make a difference.
Hugely. I would say, in terms of our own relationship with failure and those fears, the most important thing we can do is have conversations around them, is to show up, explore that vulnerability and sort of be honest and build that self-awareness and that self-value that we have, and build that vocabulary as well around, calling out those emotions. Naming them is the first step to be able to sort of recognize them and then start working with them. The conversation that we have with ourselves is the most important conversation. Again, we are typically the only people who would berate ourselves for not being good enough, for not spending the time, etc., etc. The people around us typically lift us up. But that's a very brave thing and quite a sort of high demand, I guess, in terms of saying to somebody, you need to have better conversations with yourself. You need to change that narrative that you've been carrying throughout your entire life. That's a huge ask. So having a good coach, a mentor, good friends, accountability buddies, somebody who can just, as you just rightly said there, just challenge, but with love, some of those thoughts and questions and fears, and just bring them out into the light and sort of say, well, hold on a minute, you've been saying this, but let's look at it in a different way. What can we learn from it? That's a brilliant question. So conversation, communication, always be brave and put your hand up and say, this is what I'm feeling. What can I do about it?
Yeah, love that. Thank you. So, Mark, is there anything you feel that we haven't talked about that would be really important for people to start unpicking their fears or start to become more aware of them and step beyond those fears?
One last point I'd probably bring around those fears is that it's okay. We don't want to sort of demonize fear. We're not trying to get rid of or eradicate fear from our lives entirely. Fear is a very healthy, natural safety mechanism. It's again our brain trying to keep us safe, albeit based on historic parameters that no longer serve us. But there is nothing wrong with fear. Fear is kind of proof that you're challenging yourself to do something brave. You're stepping forward. That's a really good thing. But again, it's adjusting the conversation that we're having with ourselves around what fear means, what failure means, what not being good enough means, and having a healthier outcome from that kind of internal debate. But yeah, fear is good. Fear is fine. Embrace it. I mean, that's the title of the book and all that kind of stuff. We talk about how to embrace fear as opposed to run away from it, because you can't escape it. It is there, but it does serve you in some ways, and that can be helpful.
Yeah, I love that reframe. And actually, you made me think, can we ever get rid of fear? Or is it more understanding your fear and not letting it hold you back?
I think it's the latter. It's the embracing the benefits of that brief moment where you question, is this right for me? Is this something that serves my values, my journey, my why? The story I'm trying to write, does it support the business I'm trying to build? Is it going to make a positive difference for my family?
It sounds like what you were just saying, that our fears can, in some situations, be really helpful. It can highlight something that either we need to address or that isn't right for us, or there's something around there that feeling of fear is highlighting to us that we need to be aware of and address in some way if we're courageous enough.
Yes, essentially it is changing that narrative around what fear means. And leaning into that body of evidence that proves that when we have been fearful and we have still taken decisive action because the outcomes we're trying to create are so important to us that we're prepared to be courageous. It's that relationship with fear that serves us well.
Yeah. So as people take their courageous steps in 2026, are there any thoughts that you think, okay, if you can keep this in your mind as you go through the year, you're going to not necessarily experience less failure, but you're going to achieve more success or more of what you want? Is there any last piece of advice?
I think the last thing I would say is get comfortable with the two no's. So there's the no that we receive, from a client or a customer who might not want to work with us in this particular moment. Get comfortable with that. I find myself sometimes frustrated that people are sort of being kind and sort of trying to let me down gently, when I'd much rather have that no so that I can let them move on. I can move on and start pursuing that next yes. So that's no number one. It's very important to remember that no is never personal. It's just about the decision in the moment. And the other no, that's really important, is the no that you yourself get to say to other people in order to set those boundaries, to establish those kind of rules that align with your own values, which keep you on track and help you work towards, again, the business you're trying to build, the life you're trying to create, and so on and so forth. Put those rules, boundaries, guidelines in place to keep you on track and almost remove the kind of hesitation or temptation to slip back into things that don't serve you.
Yeah, amazing advice. I love that. I was recently speaking at an event and someone asked me afterwards that, she said she's introverted, but people often mistake her for an extrovert and therefore ask her to do all of these things that drain her energy and it's not right for her. She goes, what can I do? And I was like, say no.
Yes. Yeah.
And it just never occurred to her. And she's like, oh, can I do that? I'm like, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
We forget sometimes that we can have more control, and saying no can be a really powerful strategy. And it's not about letting other people down. It's about, as you say, putting those boundaries in place so that we can be our best selves and serve people more. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And I know you've got a quiz. So if people are wondering where their fears are, I'm assuming this quiz is going to help them. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's called Business Bravery Quiz. It's online. You can share links, I'm sure, in the notes and things. But it's essentially a sort of light-hearted but fun measure in terms of where you are on that business bravery scale. It's sort of like 4 quadrants that move you through from someone who's essentially trapped by fear and lacking clarity around what it is they want and why that's important, all the way through to someone who knows exactly what they want and is comfortably taking the brave steps in order to achieve it. And there's various activities and kind of suggestions in terms of how you might move through the squares, depending on where you find yourself at the end. It's only 16 multiple choice questions or something. So just a couple of minutes to, assess how comfortable you are with fear right now.
Yeah, I love that. So as you say, I will put the link to that in the show notes for people that they can get on my website. Just click on the podcast tab. And your book is How to Embrace the 4 Fears of Business Ownership. Brilliant title. And obviously people can go out and get that to do the quiz, become aware, read the book, and obviously they can come and work with you as well. If people do want to know more about you and your work, where's the best place for them to go?
So my website, which is very easily named markfranklin.co.uk. It's easy to find. And then I'm also on LinkedIn a lot. So if you just search Mark Franklin 4 Fears Guy, you'll find me on there.
Brilliant. I love it. Thank you so much, Mark. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and
Thank you.
I'm sure it's really enlightened our listeners a lot.
Thank you so much again for having me on, Melitta. It's been a pleasure. Really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you have enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And I don't know about you, but I really love the reminder that fear is not the enemy. It's often a sign that you're doing something brave, something meaningful, and something that actually matters. If you want to go deeper, then Mark mentioned his business bravery quiz, and I'll put the link to that in the show notes for you, alongside the link to his book, How to Embrace the 4 Fears of Business Ownership, and where you can connect with him over on LinkedIn and his website. Now, as promised, a quick reminder. So this Monday, my book, Value Whispering, the smarter way to market your small business that just happens to be brilliant for introverts, will be available on Amazon at the very special launch price of 99 cents or pence, or whatever the currency happens to be in your part of the world. It's at a super low price. So do go and get your copy. Tell your friends, tell them to get a copy as well. This has got my entire blueprint, my entire process of breaking down how to identify your true value, communicate that in a way that other people get it and say, oh my gosh, I need that, I need to work with you, and how to map out that entire messaging, marketing, sales, onboarding, retention, and referral process, the entire customer journey. Now, one of the reasons that I wrote this book is because so many marketing books I read were either designed for large business, for people who already understand marketing, already have a team, already have a big budget, or it goes into a small part of marketing that makes sense, but you're like, well, how does that one thing connect with everything else that I'm doing? Because if you're running your own business, maybe you have a small team, but for many of you, it's just you. And trying to map everything out in a way that's manageable, feels doable, is aligned to who you are, that experience you want to create for your clients, and already sets them up for success. Very few books have that entire process. And so that is what you'll find inside my book, all written in a very straightforward way. If you enjoy this podcast, it's the same tone, it's the same style in the book, because it's me, I wrote it. So it's really breaking things down, keeping it simple, taking step by step through that process with a few stories from myself and some of my clients along the way, just to take you a little bit deeper, give you an idea of what that looks like in practice. And there is a whole heap of resources that you can tap into online to accompany the book as well. So you can go and grab that on Monday for 99 cents, whatever. And I do want to ask you a small favor. And it's a small favor, but it makes a huge difference. It will take 1 minute of your time, but reviews really matter. If you've ever been on Amazon looking for your next read, the reviews that people leave really help influence you in your decision, help you make the right decision for you. So once you've read the book, it would mean so much to me and so many other business owners around the world, particularly those who want to just run away and never market their business ever again, or those people who are a little bit more introverted or want a more meaningful way to show up and are struggling to find that way. Your review will help them to find this book and know what to expect. So if you can read the book and go and leave an honest review on Amazon, and if you take a snapshot of that review, and if you happen to share it on social media, send me a snapshot of that as well, and I will put you into a draw for a competition to win a mastermind day with me here in my home in Switzerland. We will deep dive into your business and we'll fine tune your marketing and messaging, that process of how you attract clients and nurture them and welcome them into your business. We're going to look at all of that to help make sure that you can achieve more in your business more income, more impact, and really feel like you're in the right place, doing the right thing. Everything feels right and good and works. So I look forward to welcoming some of you to my home. There may be some spot prizes along the way as well. So do send me a snapshot of your review and or your social media post. If you send me both, you get 2 entries and double the chance of winning, of course. Alongside that, you will find all the details you need and the link to send those snapshots to me at melittacampbell.com/competition. So thank you in advance for supporting the launch, supporting my book. And I really can't wait to hear your feedback, how you find the book, the pre-readers, those people who've read it in advance, just to help me fine-tune things ahead of the launch. They have some amazing feedback to give. And what I really tried to achieve with this book is the same feel as my first book, A Shy Girl's Guide to Networking, because so many people told me that they loved how it felt as they were reading through the book, that they were fully supported, that I was actually there beside them, step by step, guiding them through, encouraging them, giving them support. And that meant so much to the readers of my first book. I really wanted to have that same feel for this second book. And the advanced readers, all of them have said that's how they felt going through the book. One lady even said that she felt really emotional going through the book because she felt supported for the first time. So I love that, and I really hope that you're going to love it too. So Amazon on Monday, go get it. Value Spring, the smarter way to market your small business. If you just put Value Spring into the search bar, you should find that book. Get your copy at that special price. And I would, again, as I say, be so appreciative if you could leave a small, honest review after you've read that book as well. So meantime, I will be back next week, and I'm going to be with the OG, Helen von Dazelden, who was the original client for my Value Whispering blueprint process. And she is going to deep dive with me in the 3 parts of the book over the next 3 episodes. So I look forward to sharing that with you. She asked some brilliant questions and we got to see the book in a new light as well. So I think if you've read the book and you listen to those interviews, it's going to be a really nice addition to your learning and insight as well. And in the next pod club, of course, we will be discussing the planisodes, this episode, and that group of episodes in the book as well. So I think that's going to be a really fun discussion. So look out for that event coming in February as well. Meantime, have a fantastic week, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode next Wednesday. Bye.